Good morning or afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone to the webinar, How SDI Modernized Supply Chain Data. I'm Ashley Tipton with Cloudera, and today we are joined by presenters from Cloudera, Trifacta, and SDI. But before I hand the reins over to our presenters, I have just a few housekeeping items to go over. We hope to have time for Q&A after the webinar, so please type your questions in the Q&A widget as you think of them. During the demo portion of this webinar, please make sure to select the media player to ensure that you can see the demo. Also, if you have further questions or would like more information about what we covered today, please make sure to answer yes to the survey question and someone will reach out to you. You can do so by selecting the survey icon button at the bottom of the console and/or when it pops up at the end of the webinar. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our first presenter, Michael. Michael, you may be muted.
Okay. Thank you, guys. My name is Mike Gurr. I appreciate you all being here today. Today's presentation covers how SDI modernized their supply chain data. Today we have four distinguished presenters. Myself, Mike Gurr, I'm the General Manager for Manufacturing here at Cloudera. We're also going to be joined by Matt Durda, who is the Customer Marketing Manager from Trifacta. And then we're lucky to have a joint customer of both Cloudera and Trifacta presenting two great presenters from SDI. We have Patrizio Cernetti, who is the VP of Procurement at SDI, and John Delegati, who's the Big Data Sourcing Specialist also at SDI. So we look forward to hearing from them in terms of the successes they've had in terms of modernizing their supply chain. Okay, so today's agenda, first of all, we're just going to talk a little bit about data management challenges and how that actually impacts, the ability for companies to manage their spend, right? And we'll move in then into kind of a modern architecture that helps, help customers manage their spend a lot more effectively. And then we'll actually get down into actual customer story from SDI, as I mentioned earlier. We'll talk about how they use the technologies that we've outlined in terms of, how they modernize the supply chain. And then we're going to open things up to questions and answers. So before we get going, what we'd like to do is just poll the team here, the people on this call, and how many of you are experiencing the following issue? Is the data that is critical to your organization siloed in various places? If you guys could just answer this question and submit it, and we'll see what we have from a response perspective. Because we actually believe that siloed data is kind of the original sin in terms of being able to manage procurement spend. So we just wanted to kind of get a handle as to where you guys are at in this area. All right. So moving it along, you see, so not surprisingly, and by the way, this is something that as a data management company, I see time and time again, right? One of the big challenges in terms of doing effective analytics and managing the enterprise effectively is the fact that data is in fact silos, and it's siloed in different places. And the challenge is to bring all that data together so that you could do more effective analytics and run your company a lot better. So that's these responses are not surprising. All right, so what we're going to talk about today, if you look at the manufacturing challenges that customers have, everybody's trying to deal with growth. They're trying to reduce costs. They're trying to manage the risk within their company. Interestingly, today, when you look at manufacturing drivers, technology itself has become a driver. In that, technology is advancing so fast in the areas of big data analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, that the tech itself is becoming a driver to a company's success. And today we're going to talk about how big data technologies can help in the areas, particularly in terms of efficiency here. How do you improve the efficiency of your supply chain? And that's what we'll be talking about in more depth as we go along. So, to the point of data fragmentation, and, I know we're talking to a lot of manufacturers in this in this audience, we really believe that data fragmentation in a lot of ways is an original sin, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of it really gets in the way of managing a wide range of processes, including supply chain processes. And that arises from the fact that manufacturers in particular is that, manufacturers typically have multiple divisions, right? And they tend to have different enterprise systems per division. They often have different enterprise systems per region. And mergers and acquisitions only exacerbate that, right? The acquired companies often have different systems than the initial company. So as a result, what we see is that each one of these scenarios drives data silos, which makes it difficult to manage the business. Now, this challenge is getting even more difficult. Why is that? Because now, not only do we have siloed real-time data sources, these are new types of data sources, right? So information like web click screens, within your manufacturing systems, it could be, and supply chain systems, it could be GPS information, real-time information from truck locations, RFID information that would give you inventory locations, web clickstream information from your consumers, right? A new type of silo, in addition to the traditional types of silos that we're talking about and which we'll talk about today, in terms of having those multiple ERP types of systems, your procurement system. These are your relational database types of transactional systems. So data silos live on, whether they be these new types of real-time data sources or these existing enterprise transactional data sources. But at the end of the day, these data silos result in an incomplete view of the enterprise, which makes it very difficult to answer very basic questions. In terms of today, for example, how are we managing our spend, right? And we'll get down to more detail on that in a second. So looking at procurement costs, let's just use this as an example of what can go wrong. So if you had two organizations, for example, that had come together and were managing information on different ERP systems or procurement systems, one of the things that might happen, you might have a buyer who's buying from supply A and putting information into a supply catalog for a filter, and another buyer who's essentially buying the same filter from a different supplier and putting it into a different supplier catalog, calling it different things, right, in the description fields that you see over there. But in fact, they really have no visibility that these parts are in fact identical by specification, right? They're described differently in each system. So it's very difficult to understand that these are the same things. And by the way, that there might be opportunities to consolidate that spend, right? Because when we look at spend consolidation, what are we really trying to answer? What parts are we buying from what suppliers? Well, if those parts are called different things in each catalog, and by the way, if the suppliers are called different things in different procurement systems, it could be Honeywell in one company, Honeywell Inc. in another company, in another system, this makes it very difficult to actually consolidate spend and optimize your spend management processes. We're going to talk a lot about that today, in particular how SDI created a solution, with Cloudera and Trifacta to be able to fix this problem. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. So what does Cloudera bring to the table? One of the things, we're a big data management company, and we work with customers to implement what we'll call an architecture for success. And what do we do? What are we essentially doing? We're essentially bringing those two types of data that we talked about, those new types of real-time data sources. That could be web clickstream data at the top. That could be truck GPS location, right? Real-time data source. In addition to being able to bring the enterprise transactional data that you saw on the left-hand side, so that could be the information from those varying procurement systems or ERP systems that I mentioned earlier. What we do is we say, we can actually ingest that information, put it into an enterprise data lake where we can store all that data in one place. We could process that data, right? We could clean it up. We could transform it for making it suitable for analytics. And then what can we do? We can actually then push that over to a wide range of analytics tool where you can now actually do unified queries across all this information. So now you've got visibility to all this information from one place, from that data lake using your BI tools. But I think even more impressive, more relevant today is the fact that now that you're storing long histories of data, what our platform also allows you to do is to look at long histories of data, see patterns in that data, and you might, for example, say that these types of weather conditions, like real-time data sources, or these types of truck location or traffic conditions lead to bad supply chain outcomes. You could develop those models and understand these factors drive good or bad supply chain outcomes, and then you can monitor those and take actions in real time. This, in general, is what the Cloudera platform allows you to do. It allows you to enable this real-time, what I'll call real-time analytics architecture. Today, we're going to be focusing more on that bottom end of this slide. We're going to show you how we can ingest data, purchasing data. We can clean it up and actually provide great analytics so that we can reduce procurement spend. And to do that, we have a best-in-breed solution. As I mentioned to you earlier, we have Cloudera at the bottom that's going to allow you to ingest, store that data. We have Trifacta, who's going to talk about how they can actually do all the data preparation, all the data cleanup and normalization, so that we could actually do analytics. And in this case, we'll show the SDI folks are going to actually show you a demonstration of this flow in action, and they're using Qlik as a analytics tool to be able to visualize all of the spend improvement opportunities, and we'll be demonstrating that to you a little bit later on. Okay, so just people using this platform are using, implementing several big data management and big data, business optimization use cases in product development, manufacturing, marketing, sales, and development. Today's focus is we're actually going to be showing you how we can do spend analytics and spend optimization. And again, that's what we're going to be focusing on for the remainder of today. So today's opportunity really is, we're going to talk about the opportunity to modernize the entire analytics lifecycle, which means we're going to show you how we could, and we'll demonstrate to you how we could ingest that data easily, store it easily, clean it up easily using the Trifacta technology that we talked about earlier. So we'll bring in that procurement data we talked about, we'll clean it up, and we'll show you how using Qlik we could actually show opportunities for spend reduction. And SDI is going to show how they implemented this very solution in production. Okay, but before we go any further, I'd like to turn it over to Matt Durda from Trifacta, who's going to take you through their part of the solution.
Thanks, Mike. And I know everybody's probably eager to see what Trifacta actually does and how our partners at SDI have found the solution to this. But I'll keep my portion short because we want to highlight that because we're very proud of our platform and what it can do, and we want you to be able to see that. But I'll just give you some brief context into what Trifacta does and how we work in this architecture. So Trifacta is a data preparation platform that allows you to wrangle and transform your data while seeing it. And as most of you probably know, a lot of you, 100% of you said in our poll question that your data is siloed. And the biggest challenge is taking your data from its source and making it available downstream, whether it's for data onboarding, ML or AI, or analytics, visual analytics, such as like what SDI uses, which is Qlik. So your data is probably siloed in very different places. You're taking, flat files from a desktop, leveraging databases, log files, IoT sensors, apps, everything. It comes from all sorts of different places, and you need to get that downstream into another platform. And there's a famous quote from DJ Patel, who's a former data scientist at LinkedIn. He was also the chief data scientist under the President Obama administration. He said, "It's impossible to overstate this. 80% of the work done in any project is cleaning the data." Some of you may have also heard another quote that's take on that is 80% of the time is spent cleaning the data. The other 20% of the time is spent complaining about the data, which may hit home with some of you. But Trifacta helps reduce these bottlenecks. So no matter if you're a data analyst, a data engineer, a data scientist, you're impacted by this problem. The entire analytics team is impacted by this 80% problem where you're cleaning your data. Trifacta helps accelerate the entire process. It helps turn raw, disparate data into clean, usable data, and reduce those bottlenecks for anybody who's a part of this overall pipeline. So how do we do it? We do it through self-service, speed, and efficiency. So self-service, as you're going to see when we show the demo of the platform, it's a very intuitive visual interface. It's a classic grid-style format where you see your data. There's self-documenting lineage in what we call the recipe. So you're empowering the people who know the database the best, but you're still maintaining the governance and lineage of the data. And with speed, you can design much faster because you're seeing instant previews within the grid view, and you're just getting continuous validation. And as you're going to see, when you click on anything within the data, Trifacta is going to give you a machine learning driven suggestion on what you're trying to do with that data. So whether you know code or don't know code, it's easy to understand. It's natural language. It's helping you further develop your process by augmenting your code or giving you the ability to do complex transformations without knowing code. And it helps you build those pipelines much faster. So once you're done actually transforming your data, cleansing your data, you can put that pipeline into an automation process and then even share it and test and do versioning control. So it does create a working relationship between the business and the IT like there never has been before. And that's where we're becoming way more effective in reducing that time to benefit ratio that we've seen in the past. And we're seeing a lot of our customers retire legacy solutions and convert them to a more modern data stack with leveraging our partners like Cloudera and then using Trifacta for data preparation. So just quickly in summary, Trifacta empowers the domain experts with intelligent visual interfaces that allows you to transform your data while viewing it. So in this case of SDI, you're going to have John, who's actually the domain expert, who is able to leverage Trifacta and Cloudera to be able to do this reporting and see success with it. And he's going to show you exactly how he leveraged the Trifacta platform to be able to do that. And it also enables IT to automate and operationalize flows created by the domain experts. So this can be reusable and repeatable. And it establishes a single platform and connects to data from a variety of sources, supporting a range of users and use cases. Also, just to note, Trifacta is a global leader in data preparation. That is our main focus, is on being a data preparation platform to reduce those bottlenecks and solve that 80% problem. We're number one. We're consistently ranked number one in data preparation from Forrester, Dresner, Gartner Peer Insights, We've got more than 85 global technology and SI partners, including Cloudera. And we're also number one with users at over 10,000 companies, and the enterprise standard data preparation platform at hundreds of accounts. And you can see some of our logos listed there. With that, I'm going to turn it over. So you've heard it from Cloudera, you've heard it from Trifacta. Now you're going to hear it directly from the horse's mouth. We're going to turn it over to Patricio and John from SDI to tell you a little bit more about their story, and then finally show you an actual demo of Trifacta.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mike. This is Patrizio Cianetti with SDI. I run procurement. And as part of our procurement offering, we also include data analytics because it's so ingrained and contained within all the data that we deal with procurement that we developed an entire offering stemming off of our procurement services. Very briefly on the company, for those that are not familiar with MRO stands for Maintenance, Repair, and Operations, and essentially anyone within the organization could buy MRO products. Anything that is tied to indirect procurement, indirect products that don't go into your finished product goods, and that are used to run your operations, your business. It's primarily tied to industrial settings, so production plants, but also on more corporate environments. Off to supply sometimes is also included in the MRO bucket. So essentially, anybody, given the number of stakeholders that are available across the organization, MRO is really tied to everything, from finance to procurement to maintenance, running your operations, and also all the engineering developments. Because of this interaction across the entire organization, you have many people that can interact and buy products and request products, many people that can request products, even the same product in many different ways, like we've seen before from Mike's example. That happens all the time. And our response as SDI is that we've developed services around the MRO ecosystem in what we call our digital supply chain. As SDI, we have been in business for almost 50 years. We're a very data-driven company, and we leverage partners in different technology and other domains that are near the way that we operate in the MRO space. You see some names here on the right side. One that I want to mention here is specifically in addition to our partners here at Cloudera and Trifacta are the ECMA system that oversees the ISO 8000 standard that guarantees this and certifies the quality of the data. Like we said before, preparation of the data is very important, but having good data is equally important, and that's what we're all about. Being a service company, interacting with suppliers and many suppliers and many clients, we see a lot of data. And each data set that we receive originally is different from the other one. It might be similar, might be different formats, similar formats, might have similar information. Again, we deal with a lot of transactions coming from clients. You see here some examples, other from suppliers, prices, catalogs, and also other information available on the marketplace. All of this information needs to be tied all together. That's why we created our Zeus platform. Zeus is just a collection of different softwares and custom codes that puts all the information together and has it in such a structure that takes different and scattered files into actionable insights. So our team does not work necessarily on all these data as separated entities, but directly into insights, into savings benchmarks, data integrity, and so on. So with this as an overview of what SDI does, and just framing the problems that we're trying to solve, I'll hand it over to John that takes you directly into the heart of what we do.
Much appreciated, Patrizio, Mike, Matt. Thank you so much for the setup. Appreciate all you guys for joining today. So first off, I just wanted to introduce myself. All these people before me, they've dealt with things like this in the past, but my experience, I believe, speaks to why you can do this yourself, or the tools that we use can help you. So I'm a strategic sourcing associate here at SDI. I wear many hats, and working with the data team is one of them. So my exposure to data was a side effect from my first job out of college. First day, I was handed a big spreadsheet, the biggest I had ever seen, and told I would keep all of the products in stock based on this data for the whole company. Needless to say, it was a challenge. All I had known was the basic Excel they teach you in statistics in college, so quite the learning experience. That being said, I'm glad my boss had that faith in me. From there, I taught myself Excel as I know it today, and that was the foundation of the rest of the knowledge used to build what you'll see in a moment. Today, I wrangle data in Trifacta and develop BI apps for SDI. And the reason that I tell you this is because you don't need to be an IT pro. I have a business degree. You don't need to go to school for computer science to do these things. You can make a real difference in a surprisingly short period of time, building on the skills that you likely have today if you're attending this webinar. So first slide is properly titled, Turning Garbage into Gold. It is a great title because that's what Itemine project was all about. That's what we called this project, turning a pile of garbage data locked away, never to be seen again, into intelligence. So before, we have centralized procurement operations here. So before we instituted this process, more or less buyers and category managers would send out for quotes, use them for their purposes, and never see them again, when in reality, locked in these files is valuable business intelligence. So what we want to do is create a central repository where we would be able to access and leverage these pieces of data. So let's show you how we got there and finally get to the finished product. So first, as I mentioned, we had hundreds of different files, as Patrizio may have mentioned and the ones before me, no standard templates, many different ERP systems, and everyone asking for their own quotes. First thing we did was we asked the sourcing team to provide all of the previous data that they had from sourcing events. We came up with a required list of fields. If you had even 2 of those fields, we wanted them, because even if we couldn't get a price, perhaps there was some other market intelligence we could gather for sourcing and operations. Files were from all shapes and sizes, from gigabytes to kilobytes. You'd be surprised how big some of these files can get. From there, we needed to standardize them, which is where Trifacta and Cloudera come into play, mostly Trifacta for the standardization. The data needed to be standardized to create the database. Headers were our first priority. Trifacta can help with a lot of things, but when you're taking a look at 400 different files that all look different, you need to do some sort of digestion before you can make the wholesale changes, which I'll show you in a minute. So we created a template of the required fields, and we gathered a team of people that know data, that are experts in the field. So sat together in a room for a couple of months and worked on changing the headers of this data and inserting some other fields that we wanted as reference as well. And we had our MDM manager, Chris Herner, in there with us to settle any errors in interpretation, right? We wanted everybody sitting around the table to have the same interpretation of the data, so we'd end up with a single source of truth. Finally, we brought it all together. So at this point, you can imagine, great, let's paste this all in an Excel sheet and call it a day, but I'm sure you're all picturing the spinning wheel of death and all of your unsaved work going away. So that obviously wasn't an option when you get to millions and millions of rows. So the files were uploaded through Trifacta into our Cloudera environment, and from there, the data sets were unioned, and the contents of the cell were standardized, which I'll show you in a minute in that demo. A few examples of the standardization can be shown here, though. So first outcome would be quality data. We have uniform data that sticks to strict formatting standards and aids in the democratization of data, allowing all of this previously locked away data to be used. And as an example here, again, I'll show live, but this shows a screenshot from Trifacta where I had some item numbers that were supposed to be loaded as integers. However, there's a red bar here. In Trifacta, a red bar means your data type doesn't match, and we were able to fix that in one wholesale swoop rather than going through all of these records individually, as you can imagine, if you have hundreds of Excel sheets you're trying to standardize. We had improved benchmarking. So the database could now be joined, as an example of a flow is shown here, with incoming client files and RFQs to produce pricing and recommended sources. Currently with good data, we're at about a 30% hit rate. It's a moving target because good data is subjective, but we're improving that number and we feel pretty good about it at the moment. And finally, it establishes database integrity. So there was a big upheaval to get this done, but now we're still going on and getting those quotes. We need to add them to the database. So this recipe down here on the bottom, which Matt had referenced, Trifacta formulas are called recipes, is repeatable. So we ingest the new data, we put it through the QC process to make sure it fits the data requirements that we have, and load it into the system, and all the data is, the correct formatting is achieved. So what this database has done, it's one of the pillars that we build SDI's Zeus suite of applications on. The data is available to the buying team to use as their version of a hypercharged MRO Google search, if you will. We have over $3.4 billion in purchase history and 2.5 million SKUs, which is growing every day, making it one of the best-in-class MRO databases around. Itemine, the specific database, powers our analytics offering, which, as Patrizio mentioned, we sell as a service as well now. And you can see there's different levels of our analytics offering that we're able to develop based on the data we're given. And we also are able to establish benchmarks, as I mentioned, without going out to market, which relieves a lot of the stress on our supply base and us here at SDI. So that being said, I am going to share a demo here. You should all be seeing my screen shortly. And so this is an example of the tool, of Trifacta, right? So we have an example of four or five Excel sheets here that all have the same headers. We only have so much time, so we have to make this bite-sized. They all have the same headers, and they all have the same data, but there's some issues with the data, and we need to join them together. This is a perfect use case for what I'm describing that we did in our Itemine database building process. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to want to add a recipe to these files so we can manipulate them. Get a recipe here. Now, one of the fantastic things Trifacta allows you to do easily, I mentioned, let's paste all the Excel files in and call it a day. Sounds good, right? Well, when you're dealing with extremely large databases, that's not the case. So what we're going to want to do is union these data sets. That means is we'll bring them all together. The columns will line up, hopefully, and we'll be able to use these as one document. So what I'm selecting here is the transaction data from the other years that we're looking to combine. Now, what Trifacta is doing here is comparing the names of the headers to see where they should fit. And like I said, we curated the headers so they line up. But if, for example, one of the files had two prices, there was a product price and a sell price, for an example, you actually have or you think there's a bad match. You actually have the ability to go in here and say, no, that's not correct. I believe it's something else, and add a different file in so that everything lines up. Conversely, if this field name was product price 1 instead of product price, and it wasn't automatically matched, you're actually able to go in there and say, no, that's product price, you're all good. And the union will update the files accordingly. So now we're going to add this to the recipe. Takes a second here. But in a much shorter amount of time than it would have taken in Excel or any other previous technology, we have all the data sets combined here. So now we have a couple of important markers to make sure this data fits our standards. We want a valid price, valid date, a uniform date format, and we also have two pieces of data here that are separated by a hyphen that we want to get rid of. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the date format. We mentioned the data quality bar previously, and as you can see, there's some mismatched values. What that means is there are dates that don't necessarily agree with the format Trifacta is seeing. So we're going to click on this, and Trifacta is going to do some profiling quickly, and it's going to show me some results about the patterns and the data used here. We can see right here there's multiple patterns used, and I'm going to want to see the details on that. So we're going to give it a second. It's generating the different patterns. So as you can see, it profiles it for us by far. The most dates are in month, day, year format. And here we have a month, day, year format, which likely means it's just a single-digit day. But we also have some abbreviations in here. So there's a lot of things going on that would normally take you a long time to fix by yourself. However, Trifacta is pretty intuitive, and it understands that you're going to want your data to be the same type, the same format. So actually, one of the recommended steps, just by clicking on it, is let's convert this data all to the same format. Right here, it recognizes a date, but it recognizes that it's not the way you may want to see it. So we'll give it a second here. Give this a refresher. Technology is fun. Here we are, so you can see it's still there. We'll just run through this one more time. One of the great things about this software in particular is that if you do, whether it's you make a mistake or you see something that you want to affect and you want to see how it looks in your data before you actually make the change, Trifacta never actually affects the source data. So I can do all of this experimentation here, find out what I actually want to see without worrying about, say, if I do it in Excel, if I don't save a master file or what have you, I run the real risk of losing the original data that I had, which obviously is not good. So here we go. Let's try this one more time here. All right, you get the idea. For some reason, it's not agreeing with me here. So we're going to move on to some other transformations, one of which being we have some data over here in the product price that looks bad as well. You can see that it's right here. And one of the things you can do is you want to make these changes, but you don't know how they'll affect the workflow. But if we click down here, there's an option to show only affected rows. So I can see here that in a product price, I need a valid number. This indicates a float. As you can see, there's number signs, special characters, letters, etc. That's no good. So we do want to delete that, and we consider that a valid step. And right over here, delete rows which are mismatched in product price. I've confirmed that this is bad data, and I'm going to get rid of the rows. Just like that, all that bad data is gone. And then my final step here was within this customer ID, I wanted to limit based on this hyphen, and I can see that there's a customer ID and a code after it as well. I highlight the hyphen. Trifacta immediately knows that this is a delimiter. It even recognizes it as a pattern in the wrangling language. What I'm going to want to do is split those values, and in this case, the left column will be my customer ID, and my right column will be a region ID. So what I can do here, I can simply click it and rename it to ID. This will be region, and I'm done. In every other example I've done of this, the profiling tool works. That's just the wonders of webinars and live demos. But point being is we have these steps in the recipe. You can save this recipe. So we do this preparation for this initial file, and this recipe can be recorded. So now when 2019 transactions come in, 2020 transactions come in, if the same standardization issues arise because it's coming from the same systems, we can simply run the data through the existing recipe and replicate that to ensure the data quality is upheld. And with that, I will end my demo here. I appreciate you joining, and I see we have a few questions here. The first one, I would say this is for the Trifacta team. So, Matt, is there any mobile compatibility for Trifacta?
Not traditionally. We'd have to find out a little bit more of like what the specific use case is, but you are doing your data wrangling in the without getting into too much of the back end of it. You're leveraging the browser, so you have to be on a network device for security reasons and things like that, especially on an on-premise installation. So Trifacta isn't necessarily a reporting tool. You would probably be doing more of like your analytics, like for instance, John, you're using Click. So that would be more of where you would need a mobile device. When you're actually building out the workflows, it would probably be much more recommended to do that on a computer rather than a mobile device. But that would be a better question for our product team if it's really required in the use case you're working on. But traditionally, you wouldn't need a mobile device for the work you'd be doing in Trifacta.
Thanks, Matt. And yeah, for my piece, just having used the technology, there may be some uses for it, but the idea is that you profile the data, you run through the pattern, and then you use it to replicate the jobs. So I'm not sure a specific use case you're thinking of, like Matt said, but it seems more conducive to a desktop environment, or it doesn't seem like something you'd urgently need to use in the field, at least in what I'm thinking. I could definitely be wrong. I had one other question, and that was linking up to live data sources. It was mentioned before. So a lot of this data can also come from live sources. What I had shown you today is strictly based off of building Excel files or any other data you may have laying around into a larger database. But if it's something where you want live feeds of your current data, I mean, we use that internally ourselves. We run it through Trifacta and have our own applications which help our buyers run the day-to-day business. So that's definitely something you can do. Trifacta would have more information on the specifics of, who can sync up to the technology and what have you. But that's definitely something we can do. If there's not any other questions, I'm good on my end.
All right, thank you guys. So I'm just double checking, and it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So with that, I would like to thank all of our presenters today for taking the time to present, and thank you all for joining us. As a reminder, a short survey will pop up when you close your browser. If you can take a minute to complete that, we would appreciate your feedback. Thanks again for your time, and have a great day.